Hi, this is James Sartorius, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson, welcoming you back to TV Confidential Radio Talk Show about television. That's happy to welcome back our friend Ray Richmond. Ray Richmond, longtime television critic and entertainment reporter for such trade publications as The Hollywood Reporter and Daily Variety, and the author of several books on television, including comprehensive guides on the making of The Simpsons and Jeopardy, as well as TV Moms, an illustrated guide, and Betty White, 100 Remarkable Moments. Ray's latest book, The Sopranos, The Complete Visual History, celebrates the 25th anniversary of the premiere of The Sopranos on HBO. The Sopranos, the multi-Emmy award-winning drama created by David Chase and starring James Gandolfini that broke new ground in television when it premiered in 1999, launching the current golden age of dramatic television on cable and digital platforms, while also setting a benchmark for the ongoing evolution of television with its innovative storytelling techniques and non-linear narratives, and taking the concept of anti-hero as protagonist for a weekly television series to an entirely different level, though hardly the first attempt to portray mob life in movies and or television. What made The Sopranos truly unique was the idea of portraying mob boss Tony Soprano as anxious, depressed, and in need of psychotherapy. As Ray Richmond says in The Sopranos, the complete visual history on his face, that is an uproarious conceit. In practice, as we saw every week on The Sopranos, it was alternately revealing, stressful, occasionally frightening, and yet in many respects highly comical. We'll tell you where you can find The Sopranos, the complete visual history, in just a second. But first, we began our conversation by telling Ray Richmond that his book is gorgeous. It is gorgeous to behold. It is gorgeous to thumb through, and most importantly, read. And that's a good way to start our conversation, because in a way, the title of your book, The Complete Visual History of The Sopranos, in a way, the subtitle of the book is misleading, and I'm going to tell you why. On the one hand, as we just have been riffing on, it is beautifully designed, lots of full color photographs, lots of full color behind the scenes exclusive photographs. And folks, full color is a publishing term. It means it is vivid, high definition, jump off the page, as close to three-dimensional color as you can imagine. So that's what we're looking at visually. It is strikingly visual in that respect, and yet it is not just a glossy coffee table book, Ray. It is thoughtfully written. It is a very analytical look at the series as a whole and the various themes that resonate from season to season.
Thank you for that. You know, that Ed, I so appreciate that assessment, and I'm grateful for that view, because the truth is we didn't have a lot of time. Usually you'll have a year, 10 months to a year to put together something like this. And the truth is they started on it really late. The idea was to tie into the 25th anniversary, which was in January of 2024. Mm-hmm. And we started work on it basically in August, September of 24. And so we're already behind the eight ball. They wanted to get it out as quickly as possible. August, September of 23. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a huge lead time for things like that.
Absolutely.
I had an amazing editor and a woman named Rebecca Razzo and a great designer and design team. And, you know, we were just determined that people were not going to see us sweat, and they weren't going to see all the work behind it. They were, you know, because nobody cares how long it takes you or it doesn't take you to put something together. All they care about is the finished product that they have in their hands, and we're charging top dollar for this thing, $65. So it had better jump off the page. And it had to be different at the same time, Ed, than the other. You know, there have been a handful of other Sopranos compendiums and you know, and a cookbook and all kinds of other things, Sopranos. So it wasn't like this was the first thing, you know, that was dedicated to the show that in a comprehensive way. So it had to be different than all that had come before it And sometimes that's the biggest challenge, is to make something distinctive.
Well, I'll tell you one thing that makes the book distinctive, and this is going to appeal to all English majors out there. It's going to appeal to my former college professors who wonder, what are you doing talking about television? Why aren't you applying all the analytical skills you learned when you were an undergraduate? You do that, man, because you not only include, there are a ton of behind-the-scenes interviews with many of the principal players of the show, including series creator and executive producer David Chase. But as I say, you go into the various themes that permeate throughout the series, and as you go through each season, you pick one or two identifying themes like family, or in the first season, motherhood, both motherhood as portrayed by Olivia and motherhood as portrayed by Carmela. And you really, this is not just a TV show. You give the readers an understanding of why this is such a cultural phenomenon and continues to reach new viewers today.
Well, yeah, that's what thank you again for that, too, Ed. What we were really determined to do is, because this show is art, this is not traditional television in any way. You know how HBO always used to be, it's not television, it's HBO. Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, The Sopranos really was, in a 13-episode season, it was basically 13 movies. And it had the production values of movies. And we realized we need this thing to be as artistic as the show itself to stand out. So we wanted it. We gave it, as you said, every chapter a theme. Whether it be motherhood or trust, or family values, or issues with royalty. We wanted to make it every chapter its own kind of mini book in itself, distinctively behind the scenes. And I was lucky to be able to get so many people from the show, mm-hmm. Including Edie Falco for interviews, including Lorraine Bracco, Stephen Van Zandt,
Dominic Chianese, Jerry Adler, who plays one of my favorite minor characters of the show, Hesh.
Hesh Rapkin,
yeah.
Right.
And the two principal casting people on the show, Ray talked to them, Ray talked to David Chase, Ray talked to everybody he could conceivably get a hold of.
Including directors, writers, production designers, everybody. And, of course, the big gap, Ed, as you know, is there is no James Gandolfini.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, he passed away very young. And that was an interesting thing in itself, is you hear so many different things about James. You hear about his being incredibly generous to the crew and the cast, but you also heard about him being incredibly difficult to pin down, and how he was, something of a prima donna, and going through his own issues, being the star of a show when he was always basically just a character actor before this, and suddenly being the guy. There's a lot of pressure on someone's shoulders, and not just the memorization of it all, but inhabiting that, suddenly being incredibly famous and not being able to go anywhere. I wished I could have talked to him about that, because that was he was in almost every scene of the show.
Yes,
he was the Sopranos, and you got different outlooks from everyone about him. There were a few people that were a little more honest about him. To be quite frank, who were like, I really had, one director in particular had real problems with him. But basically, a lot of that stuff was edited out because they didn't want it to be controversial. They wanted it to be much more supportive, and because HBO was behind it, they have no interest in trying to assess anything about the cast and the storylines. This is strictly promotional from their perspective. So my hope was that it didn't come across at all as kind of a PR puff job. I really wanted it to be insightful at least about the characters and about all the work that went into the show.
Well, no, I think we've addressed that. It is not just a glossy coffee table book. It is a book that if you pick up and read and read each chapter, each page, as if you're a fan of The Sopranos, you're going to want to do anyway, because it's the type of book that you're going to want next to you, as you said, on the couch, binge watching, the episodes or revisiting the episodes as many people are going to do. It is a very depthful book. That book being The Sopranos, a complete visual history by our guest Ray Richmond, a rich photographic journey through the trials and tribulations of TV's most celebrated anti-hero Tony Soprano. The Sopranos, a complete visual history, available wherever books are sold through Insight Editions. You can also find it at Amazon.com, where books are sold online, those outlets as well.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
Hi, this is Michelle Lee, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
I'd like to propose a toast to my family. Someday soon, you're gonna have families of your own. And if you're lucky, you'll remember the little moments that were good.
Before I forget, you mentioned, this is a book that you did not have a lot of lead time to put this book together. So it's amazing that it came out as beautiful and as rich and colorful as it is. How did you get involved in this project, Ray?
I had actually worked with. You might remember that I wrote a book about Betty White just before she did. Before she passed, and in fact, you interviewed me on your fine Television Confidential show about that book. One of the same people who worked for the publishing company on my Betty White book was working now for this different company, and we'd had a really successful time, on the Betty White book. It did incredibly well. It was a bestseller in Walmart and Target, so it did well beyond the online world. And they knew that I had a long history of being a television critic and just being involved in television journalism in general. And to be honest, they kind of pursued me and were like, okay, here's how much time. I had a full-time job and I have a teaching job. I teach TV history at a local university, at Chapman University in Orange County. So I had plenty on my plate. And they were like, no, we really need you for this. And I'm like, I just don't have time. And they're like, well, look, you can have to have my name on something Sopranos was the lure. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to find time. I'm just going to carve out time and somehow do it. So, I said no 5 times before I said yes. And there were plenty of other people who could have done this, arguably just as well. But I'm grateful now, especially that they did bug me into it, and being able to go and talk to the cast members and everything else. I mean, it was just such a pleasure because these people, Carmela and Meadow and AJ and Dr. Melfi and Silvio, these people they became family members to us on this show. I mean, it was like we were all kind of extended, Italian family members. It was an honor and a pleasure, and I feel like this is kind of, at this point, the definitive book about this show. But we can't get over it, And one of the reasons why it holds up so incredibly well. I was able to, I watched every episode 3 times, so it's a huge amount of work. But it just holds up incredibly well, and it's one of those shows that's never going to go out of style, because it's the storylines and the characters. It's always about the characters. People wonder, why do we remember Seinfeld? Why do we remember Cheers? Why do we remember, The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and the shows like this show that sparked a drama golden age, Mad Men. It's always the characters. These are people that we can relate to, that we inhabit, who make us think about our own situations and who we care about. And we cared about these guys. And, people ask me, who was my favorite character on the show? And it's really easy. It's Tony Sirico, who played Paulie. Because every time, I swear to God, Ed, every time, Paulie Walnuts showed up on screen, I just started. I got this hole in the pit of my stomach. The guy just scared the crap out of me. There was just something about him that makes you cringe, and it wasn't a surprise to find out that Tony Sirico was the one member of the cast who actually had real mob ties.
Yeah.
Who was a genuine good fella himself, who had been in and out of prison before his acting career. So obviously, everybody's favorite character is Tony, but
no, my favorite character was Melfi.
Melfi was you know what? And Lorraine Bracco will tell you that this was, even though of course she'd been in Goodfellas herself,
Mm-hmm.
She will tell you that that this was the role of her life,
Mm-hmm.
and she had to really rein it in, and because Melfi was so controlled,
Yeah.
and so straight ahead, and that was not her. That's not Lorraine Bracco. Lorraine Bracco is always wild and crazy and loved to party and loves to, and she was like, I had to just completely rein in all of my artistic impulses to play this woman. So it was real acting, what you were seeing. I don't have a single genuine therapist bone in my body. This was just acting, all on display.
Yeah, but at the same time, as she tells you, Ray, in The Sopranos, the complete visual history, now available wherever books are sold through Insight Editions, she did not have a quote-unquote Melfi or therapist bone in her body. She knew from her own experience how helpful therapy could be, so she was able to approach it that way. And
Yes.
and that was the foundation on which she built her performance.
That's actually true. And well, as any actor who's been around for a while will tell you, I don't think there's, Ed, let's face it, there's probably not an actor in Hollywood who's been around for any amount of time that isn't in therapy. I mean, come on. But I mean, everybody that I spoke to, just they all of the actors would said that this was basically the greatest experience of their life, and gave them such pleasure to do creatively and put them on the map. I mean, these guys would talk about walking around New York during the time that the show was being produced, and if they're walking down Broadway, people would be cheering. Like construction workers would be standing up and applauding. I mean, they were superstars, and you don't have too many of those experiences in your life as an actor. If you have one, you're incredibly lucky.
The Sopranos, the complete visual history, rich photographic journey through the trials and tribulations of TV's most celebrated anti-hero, Tony Soprano, as he attempts to balance the responsibility of domestic life with life in the quote-unquote family, mob family that is, all while suffering through panic attacks, a toxic mother, and a power-hungry uncle who would rather see him dead than boss. The Sopranos, a complete visual history by our guest Ray Richmond, available wherever books are sold through Insight Editions. You can also find it Amazon.com, where books are sold online. I want to circle back to one point you mentioned earlier. And not that I don't want to suggest that you and I are peers, but I would just tell you, speaking from freelancer to freelancer, it is always good when they want you, because 9 times out of 10, it's you pitching them to get your foot in the door. But so when they come after you, that's a nice position to be in. And I just want to explain, that doesn't happen all the time.
No, it's true. It's true, Ed. And I was incredibly grateful that they did come after me. Part of me is I always, as freelancers, part of us always feels like a fraud. Mm-hmm. We always feel like at any moment they're going to just, break down in question, kind of say, you know what, I'm sorry, this just isn't working out. We understand that you've been faking this the whole time. We know you're not a real writer. So when they do come after you and they do value your point of view and your writing skill, or whatever the skill may be, it's a pleasure and an honor. And especially again, I feel like The Sopranos is right up there as possibly the great. Well, this and Breaking Bad, I believe, are the two greatest dramas ever on television. And everybody that's involved in the show that's still with us. Unfortunately, people like Nancy Marchand are no longer with us, and neither is Tony Sirico and of course James Gandolfini. But the others that are still here, they still are still able to dine out on this show, and it's given them careers. It's given them careers. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing that the a show. Here's the thing, Ed, is when the show came on the air, HBO still was not really established yet as an original program producer.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd had a show called Oz, which was their first drama about, a prison drama called Oz. And they had a comedy called Dream On.
Yes, with Brian Benben, yeah.
But there were so many different. They were not on the map yet in terms. It was still ABC, NBC, CBS was still running the show. Cable was still not in its infancy, but it was in its infancy as a content creator. So that's why they couldn't really get any big stars, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I mean, the biggest star that they got was Lorraine Bracco,
Mm-hmm.
who had been in Goodfellas. But otherwise, all unknowns. Think about it. I mean, James Gandolfini, Edie Falco, who was on Oz, the prison drama.
Mm-hmm.
But none of the people on the show, except later on, were stars. They were all just character actors, maybe guys that played mobsters, in bit parts in films. And it was this show that made them stars. And I mean, I'm whenever I watch, it really did. It just launched this golden age of drama. The first season of the show it really did play like a 13-hour movie and kind of jolted viewers out of their comfort zone. Because think about it, the standards regarding language and nudity and sex and violence. I mean, this was not stuff that television would. The stuff that was on The Sopranos is not stuff that television ever gave you. This was still in the earliest days of premium cable. Violence, the subject matter, all of the standards evaporated and paved the way for this future of Mad Men and The Wire and Deadwood and Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad.
Ray Richmond is the author of The Sopranos, the complete visual history, everything you want to know about the iconic HBO drama that is widely regarded as one of the greatest television shows of all time. Ray will be back next week for part 2 of our conversation. We'll continue to talk about the various ways in which The Sopranos changed the landscape of television over the past 25 years. Plus, we'll talk about the famous final episode of The Sopranos and how, depending on how you look at it, it is either the greatest or most aggravating series finale ever conceived. Ray Richmond will be back next week on TV Confidential. In the meantime, The Sopranos, the complete visual history, available wherever books are sold through Insight Edition. Take a quick time out. We'll be back with more TV Confidential right after this. Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to the TV Confidential podcast. If you like what you hear, please consider subscribing to the TV Confidential podcast, or better yet, give us a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or wherever you listen to our podcast.